Hello, I'm Frances Deegan Horowitz, President of the City University Graduate Center. Welcome to Women, a series of programs for and about us. I'm delighted the multinational, multilingual, and multi-talented Hanna Arie-Gaifman is able to join us today. Her title, Director of the 92nd Street Y Tisch Center for the Arts, only begins to define her work. Welcome. In fact, long before you came to the 92nd Street Y, you've had quite an odyssey. And it began in Prague?
It began in Prague.
And?
And it went to Jerusalem, then to California, back to Jerusalem, to New York, then to Prague, and back to New York.
Are you yourself a musician?
I would say a failed musician, yes. I'm a trained pianist.
But seriously, you
yes.
considered...
I considered very seriously a musician's career. I studied at the Music Academy in Jerusalem, but I felt that there were enough mediocre pianists, and I was really interested in broader culture as well, and then went to the university.
And you were born in Prague?
I was born
in
Prague.
When did you leave?
We left in March 1964, when there was a slight opening for Jewish families to unite. And I'm not quite sure till this very day, there was some kind of a silent agreement, I think with the JDC, to actually help Jews who had parts of families to leave the communist countries. There's a big emigration from Romania and a much smaller one from Czechoslovakia. There were few Jews left.
Yeah. And why Jerusalem? Is that where your family was?
Well, that's actually where my grandfather died. And Jerusalem was the natural place for us. And I never thought to move anywhere else in Israel. And it was the place where my parents wanted to be, and which I loved to death.
And when you decided that you weren't going to be a professional pianist, then what did you do?
Well, I continued playing and studying. I mean, I did continue my studies, and at the same time studied Russian studies and English literature at the Hebrew University. And then continued in Stanford, and then wrote my doctorate in comparative literature on the good soldier Schweik and his place within the history of playful literature, from Cervantes to what came after.
So were you headed for a university teaching career?
I actually had a short or not so short university teaching career. I taught at Berkeley, and then Jerusalem, and then at NYU, and then in 1993 went to Prague for 3 months to run a short program, which then turned into 7 years, you know, like Jacob.
What? Except there was no Rachel and Leah.
No. I know Jacob. But the roots were there.
What was it like going back to Prague?
Wonderful and strange. It was, I couldn't go back all these years. We left in '64, and with an Israeli passport, you were blacklisted. So it was a little bit like this dream, and with the years it became this idealized place. And I knew it was beautiful, and I remembered every street and every place. What never occurred to me that there would be deterioration, that it would not be, you know, the Prague of my dreams. At the same time, it was, you know, the time of revival and rebuilding and search for different cultural identities, the search for the roots and past that would enable people to move forward. It was not just the years of communism, it was also the Nazi occupation. It's all subduing and clearly not completely destroying the heritage of, you know, liberal thought and creativity. Then there was the search for Jewish identity, and there I was involved with the Musica Judaica Festival.
So what was your job in Prague?
Well, I went there to work for the International Mozart Academy, which was kind of a short postgraduate program for people to study chamber music within cultural context, the dream, right, combination of music and general culture. While I was there, I got involved with this Musica Judaica Festival, which friends of mine started to reintroduce Jewish culture, and they kind of felt that they were at a dead end after 2 years. So I felt that that was the right thing to do, and I ran that festival for the next few years. At the same time, the Czech Philharmonic was in a rebuilding period, and it was very interesting because within my academic life I was always interested in the part of artistic patronage and what enables people to create, you know, especially if you write about Hašek, who actually wrote his masterpiece because he needed money, like Cervantes. Suddenly there is this new world and cultural institutions that existed and flourished under one political system,
and that was totally supported by that political system.
And was completely supported by the political system, and the orchestra was wonderful. They were not very well paid, but they did better than other institutions.
Were they controlled under communism in terms of the kinds of programs they could and couldn't do?
Not so much the programs, but of course, if somebody was suspicious element, they could not travel abroad, and the orchestra toured extensively, even under communism. Then when freedom came, they were a bit disoriented and were constantly changed conductors, and that was at that time when they asked me to step in as a consultant, and we brought Vladimir Ashkenazy in, and there was a new revival, and it was wonderful, very creative.
And what did you specifically do?
I worked with them on both programming and the relations with international conductors, and helped with organizing some of the more creative tours, and as actually liaison with the Western world.
And financially, did the government continue to support the orchestra?
They did, but of course suddenly it was not so glamorous, you know, whatever the salaries were before, and so there was the whole capitalist world, but there was also support from the banks, and they continued traveling. But it's a problem because the orchestra is badly underpaid in comparison to any serious orchestra in the West.
But in comparison to the West, Europe has a stronger tradition of underwriting, of government underwriting the arts.
Absolutely.
And was that continued?
It's continued. It's just that, you know, perceptions have to change, what the needs are of players, what is the appropriate salary, what is the appropriate time. It is still one of the cheapest countries for film companies to go and record films because the orchestras are relatively underpaid.
And when did you leave Prague again?
In February 2000, when I came to the Y.
And why? Why?
Well, because it's the Y. That's actually really the reason, because the Y is this amazing combination of everything that I love and I'm interested in, both music, literature, Jewish culture, and an institution that has long historical tradition, and that is also very appealing. And it's true to itself. There's real cultural integrity in this institution that goes on.
What do you mean by cultural integrity?
There is an honest search for its own role in society, both socially and its responsibility as community center and as a cultural center. There is real need for excellence and understanding of what is needed by society in general, as well as, you know, the Jewish cultural roots. Now, is it part of the Jewish consciousness the way it was with the Jews in Germany, who actually established the 92nd Street Y? I don't know, but it is there.
What do you mean the Jews in Germany established the 92nd Street Y?
It's German Jews who established in
when
1874.
when they came
here, yeah, that's what I mean. But it was also the Jews in Germany who worried about the world in general. I mean, like Kurt Weill or Hans Eisler, who was such a devoted communist that he managed to destroy his own life, right? The composers. But the 92nd Street Y was established by Jews who came from Germany to America as a community center and as a cultural community center. They saw it appropriate to build what I consider still the best concert hall in this city. It's the best acoustics. You know, why should a community center have such a fabulous concert hall? Because that's part of the quality of life that we should have.
Well, we call it the 92nd Street Y, but it was the Young Men's Hebrew Association?
It still is. That's the Y. It's the Young Men Hebrew Association and Young Women Hebrew Association. And it still is. I mean, it's the Y that stands for that, yes. It's just too long as a title.
Oh, well, everyone says the 92nd Street Y. But in a city where you've got Carnegie Hall and you have the Metropolitan Opera and you have all of Lincoln Center, where does the Y musically fit?
I would say the Y has, what we hope to present is the things that have thematic, that have a reason, or we have a reason to present, either for their content or to present artists that we believe should be here and are not on any of the stages that you just mentioned. I believe that there is actually no stage for continuous Jewish culture in the more cultural and musical sense. Not necessarily related to religious experience, the way the Tokyo Quartet presented this year, these exiled composers who rediscovered their Jewish identity by force of history. But also to look at different aspects of Jewish religion within a cultural context, whether it's a Kol Nidre in its different musical settings, or the Binding of Isaac. That's what we plan for next year, where again there are more painting than music, but there is a place for a more interdisciplinary presenting. I think that I'm really lucky to be a responsible board for music and literature at the Y, and we can do programs that have the richness and tradition of the Poetry Center. So there is a place for that type of, I would say, content-oriented and theme-oriented musical programming.
But you also build programs out of the standard repertoire. I mean, I used to go to the Y for the Brandenburg Concerto, which I love, and Mozart and Beethoven and so on, which don't have any particular Jewish connection.
Oh, no. I didn't mean that everything we present has to have that type of a Jewish connection. But I'd say if we present Mozart, we try to present it again in some kind of a, for some thematic reason. So if next year we do 3 programs on Mozart with Charles Rosen, where he plays Mozart within history, with lectures before the program. And the program that Tokyo Quartet presents is again dedicated to the larger chamber music works with the emphasis on the viola quintets, so that basically we have the opportunity to hear all of the Mozart viola quintets, as well as some of the wind quintets and wind quartets and the piano quartet. And we happen to bring a few artists that have not been in New York at all, or rather seldom into the series. And that's the other part which I really feel very strongly about, having my European roots and knowing some of the European artists that I love.
What is your greatest challenge?
I would say to overcome the prejudice that there is no need for these programs. Because otherwise I think we have, I believe there is, and I believe there is audience and need for, I would say, intellectually demanding programming, and that people really love it. And the other part would be the thought that Jewish culture is limited to liturgy or folklore, or different types of Jewish folklore. And I don't think we actually know enough of that. We know something about the Ashkenazi tradition, and I don't know how many people know that klezmer guilds existed in the Middle Ages, and the first one was in Prague, but that's my little contribution.
So how do you strategize to position the Y as to be perceived as a very needed venue in this enormously rich, culturally rich city?
I think we have moved from a potpourri of programs to programs that each, I believe, has a need and has a role. And I have to say, I feel like we're at the beginning of the way after 5 years at the Y. I've just given a few examples. Similar development is happening in the Poetry Center. If we were the first ones to have authors read their works, and that happened 65 years ago, the first series, today you have tributes to living poets. We do a lot of verse drama, semi-stage drama, thematic selections from Shakespeare. We're just working on tonight actually we're presenting a program about Eudora Welty and Spanish music. So there is all that which is really special to the Y. And then there is, of course, the guitar series. And sometimes I think that when the architects built the hall, they didn't know how perfect it is for the acoustic guitar.
And do you have to worry about the finances of all of this?
Always, but then all of us do. But I have to say, again, we have been very well supported. We are thrifty. We're very careful. It's harder than if you had a hall for 2,000 people.
What is the hall seat?
917.
Exactly.
But exactly. You know, it's actually only slightly smaller than the Prague Rudolfinum, which was built for Dvořák's symphony orchestra. But it feels like a living room, and it's perfect for chamber music. And I think it offers people even some kind of better conditions to be attentive. I don't know if you ever felt when you're there that people cough less than in other halls. It's quieter in absolute terms.
Well, that's very interesting because, in fact, we were there recently for the chamber music with Jaime Laredo and Janusz Starker. And I did think to myself, it was still not quite spring, that there was less coughing. But, you know, I just happened to notice that.
It is striking. It is. Sometimes I feel like the walls help us to be more attentive and quiet.
Do you think it's the ventilation in there that makes a difference?
No, the ventilation, I hope, will be better and improved soon. But in fact, we have, I think all the concert halls have that problem, that it is either too cold, too warm. I really believe that, first of all, we have wonderful audience. You know, it's the audience.
You have a very serious audience.
And contrary to what most people think, that we only have aging audience, we don't. I was actually struck by how many young people were there at this last concert of chamber music at the Y. But I think we really have very attentive audience. And there is the atmosphere of the hall also leads to quiet.
And does the audience let you know what they like and don't like? I know
Oh,
obviously they
yes.
vote with their feet, but in terms of communicating with
Oh
you?
yeah, oh yeah, when they love it and when they hate it. But of course mostly when they're dissatisfied. But yes, they do, and we have a very personal contact with people.
And
I'm there for every event, almost every event, and I love it.
how far out do you plan, strategize?
2, 3, 4 years ago. Ahead.
Ahead.
Yeah. It's part of, these kind of thematic thinking and an attempt to bring the artists that I really believe should be at the Y and that New York should have the opportunity to hear.
There's so much that goes on at the Y. Are times and spaces carved out for your programming as opposed to other kinds of programming, or do you control all of that programming?
Oh, no, we have a wonderful democratic system of, in some way, I plan ahead. So I have the advantage of knowing which dates I will need at the hall. But then we meet with the other colleagues who program for other centers, other programs, whether it's the lecture program or the Jewish lectures program. And we coordinate our times, and if something changes, we try to negotiate exchanges. It works.
Do you ever run into issues of controversial programming?
What do you call controversial programming? We don't have the story that there's the famous story about Dr. Kolodny who, 40 years ago closed the curtain on Norman Mailer. When Norman Mailer made the same joke at the beginning of the season, it didn't look like anything you would close a curtain on. So I'm not quite sure what controversial programming would be. I have never been told I couldn't program anything. And every question at the Y can be raised. It's amazing, actually, how free and how open this whole organization is. It's whether I present, whether we present artists from anywhere in the world. Next year it's the encounter of Jewish and Turkish culture in 17th and 18th century. Because I thought that it would be interesting to learn about another tolerant society throughout the arts. And I never felt anything of that kind, no.
Who do you answer to?
Of course, to the board, to our audiences, and to the Associate Executive Director for Programming, Hanna Arie-Gaifman, to the Director General, Sol Adler, but mainly to my conscience.
And if you were to pick out the favorite program you've done, what would you pick?
In these 5 years, there would be several, but the first one that comes to mind is the weekend dedicated to Stefan Wolpe.
Why?
I think that he was an extremely important composer, important teacher, still not sufficiently recognized either in the artistic community or in the community in general. If you speak to jazz artists, many will tell you, oh, we studied with Stefan Wolpe, or my peers studied with Stefan Wolpe. Actually, it was Dick Hyman who told me that. He had a tremendous influence on composers, whether Morton Feldman or others. I think he was the prototype of the German Jew involved in society between the wars. He was active in the communist movement together with Kurt Weill and Hans Eisler. then he discovered his Judaism partially again because of the Nazi regime and the years in Palestine. He was actually a pioneer there too, because he was the first important personality to speak about the roots in the Middle East and the importance of Middle Eastern music for Jewish culture again. And his music is very hard to play, so there are not that many artists who are willing to dedicate their lives to it. But I'm very grateful to Peter Serkin, who took part in that program, and all the other artists who were involved. I think it's very important. You know, this is the kind of, let's say, Jewish cultural programming that I think is very important.
Well, you obviously have had a major impact on, I think, the musical programming at the Y has, the consciousness of its position in New York City has increased dramatically under your leadership. And I'm sorry, but we're out of time. My thanks to Hanna Arie-Gaifman for joining us. And you'll learn more about the 92nd Street Y Tisch Center for the Arts programs by logging on to its website, www.92ndstreety.org. For the City University Graduate Center and Women to Women, I'm Frances Deegan Horowitz.